Greetings and God bless. Welcome to another episode of Pastor Mike, Dynamic Voices for a Diverse Church, powered by The Witness, a Black Christian collective. I am your host, as always, Tyler Burns. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Burns Clan. Please follow at your own risk. And I do not have the blue check verified original here with me today, but I love this, because when you need a sacrifice, God will provide a ram in the bush. God will provide... We got somebody special. We got another blue check verified, another New York Times bestselling author. And let me tell you something on a serious note. We have one of the most incredible trailblazing voices in racial reconciliation, not just in the church today, but I believe in the church in the last century. I'm speaking of course, the founder of Be the Bridge, Latasha Morrison. Latasha, how are you?
Well, I am good. I'm like, when you said the blue check verified, I'm like, that is hilarious because you do that to Javar every time, Lord.
Every time. Now it's you. Now you're the blue check verified.
That is so funny. Oh my goodness. It's good to be here.
It is such an honor to have you on the podcast and talking about your forthcoming book, Brown Faces, White Spaces. I am so excited. By the time some people hear this, the book will already be out. And so you can go wherever books are sold and pick that up. And these are a collection of vignettes and expressions that you tackled very difficult, touchy subjects.
Yeah.
And it's a follow-up to your New York Times best-selling book. And I want to ask you this question before we get into the book. Okay. There's something really fascinating that Barna and other research pollsters have said, that in the wake, after all of the racial justice uprisings and after people protested, that actually the thoughts about racial justice and equity, that people actually had more negative thoughts post all of that it had done something to them. There had been some sort of attrition regarding race and racial conversations. And so as we think about that in the work that we do, I wanted to ask you, how are you navigating endurance? This is your life. The racial reconciliation conversation is your life. How are you dealing with attrition and fatigue and exhaustion from the racial reconciliation conversation?
It's been difficult. I'm gonna be honest. It's been really hard, navigating this, and especially because there was an opportunity. We missed a beautiful opportunity in 2020, and I think it was God's grace was there. And we're really the fringe of the turning point started within the church with the whole CRT. That kind of blew it up. But this is the thing, historically, Tyler, this has always happened. This has always happened. You think about even after Reconstruction, you think about after the Civil Rights Movement, you get, Nixon, what I'm saying? We've always had those things. And so that gets exhausting because it's like we keep falling prey to the same tactics, rather than looking at the facts. And the thing is, a lot of the work, in 2020 was very performative, and there was no conviction. Like, it's conviction that moves the needle. And in order for people to be transformed, they have to have encounter with Jesus, and I really feel that as churches get far and further away from the message of Jesus, we're going to see, the same thing. So it shouldn't be a surprise to us, but it did give hope, and it gave hope to those people who are in this work that are not believers. I heard Ta-Nehisi Coates for the first time in tears being interviewed during 2020, and was just amazed at the fact that, this wasn't just Black people marching. This was, everyone for every ethnicity, that was out there marching. And he said, for the first time, I knew y'all going to be surprised, because he's very pessimistic, and he said, for the first time in my life, I have hope.
Wow. Hmm.
And this is someone who doesn't know the hope giver,
Hmm.
you know? And so it's just, and this is, and so the church, it grieves me that some of the fringe things like that, are like created and incubated within the church, It's sad, but not surprising. So we've been here before, and I've had to talk myself off. No, I don't want to say cliffs because I'm not like like that, but I'm just saying I had to encourage myself in continuation, because this is not something that I chose. This is something that chose me, that God chose me for. And
Yes.
and so trusting God that He's going to equip, but also not married you know, to
Hmm.
this, like, hey God, whatever you would have me to do, I'm going to do it, you
This is,
know?
and that's really what I've appreciated about you watching your journey is
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like for some people it seems like, and this is just as observation, and I've been in this space myself, that facilitating racial justice, racial reconciliation conversations has almost become them. It's almost consumed them. And I feel
Yeah.
for you, it's been your work, but I feel like you have this healthy distance from it, that
Yeah.
you are still figuring out who you are and you are
Yeah.
navigating who you are as a Black woman, as a leader, as an
Hmm.
entrepreneur, as a
Yeah.
voice, but it doesn't feel like you are consumed by the work. Can you talk
Yeah.
about the boundaries that you have to establish? Because I think some
Yeah.
people we're so convinced, and now as we enter into election cycle and we enter
Hmm.
into again what's going to be an inundation of passion around justice and
Yeah.
reconciliation and equity, how do you establish healthy boundaries and keep yourself from being almost consumed by this work?
That's a good question. One of the things is I had to really at the early stages of this, I had to remember that this is God's work, not my work. Okay.
Come on,
And
come on.
so, and then I also had to remember this is God's issue and not my issue, And this is God's yoke, not my yoke. You know, I'm just being used as a vessel during this period of time, to hopefully help encourage hope and help lead others, into a deeper understanding, to help teach, and help form people in a healthier, um, um, d- discipleship manner, Um, so I think I have to hold it with open hands, because as soon as I grab my feet and think this is my fight and my work, it'll consume you. And I
Right.
have to keep my heart pure, in the midst of this, and not letting my fears, my doubts, and my pain, mar my heart, because then I'll be
Mm,
producing the very thing that I'm fighting against,
mm,
and that's not healthy. And so for me, um, that is a battle, because people will try to, you can get pulled into that. And I always tell even my people, my team, like, we gotta take a time out. We gotta sometimes keep it fun. I love to have a good time. Like, so just not taking myself so seriously, and knowing how to turn it on and turn it off, and knowing that it's not mine to have. This problem is too big, for me, and just for Be the Bridge. Like, we got to partner with people, we got to work with people, we got to lift other people up, we got to, you know what I'm saying? We got to partner across the lines. And so I think keeping that perspective helps me. And then I've had a lot of loss in this. I lost my dad in the midst
yes.
of COVID.
Yes.
I just lost my grandfather. I lost my
Goodness.
best friend at the top of the year. I mean, this is my best friend who I've known, since first grade. So there's been a lot of, I think, laws that helps me keep perspective, that this life that we live is short. I'm only here for a short while, you know? And
Mm,
at the end of the day, God is still God, and God is
yes.
still good. and God is still great. And in spite of all the things that we're enduring, and so I just really try to be grounded in the character of God and in that certainty to know that He will fulfill His promises, and that's what keeps me grounded.
Let's talk about brown faces, white spaces.
Hmm.
And before, thank you so much for sharing those things. I feel like a lot of times for I see it behind the scenes with people like Jamar, who are such lightning rods for
Yeah,
conversation and people's opinions. And people forget y'all are navigating real life too.
yeah,
And so we
yeah,
just want to, before I move on, just hold space for the fact that
yeah,
you talked about such loss and
yeah.
grief. And we thank you for continuing in the midst of that,
Hmm.
but also prioritizing what's healthy and right for you, that perspective,
Yeah.
remaining human, remaining grounded in that. So
Hmm.
I didn't want to let that pass without acknowledging, you
Thank
sharing
you
that
for
with
asking
us.
me that question. That's a good question.
So
Yeah.
brown faces, white spaces. This is a follow up to Be the Bridge.
Yeah.
What was it? First of all, what was it like to be a New York Times bestseller? I talk with Jamar about this stuff sometimes, but what was it
Uh-huh.
like to be a New York Times bestseller in light of now having to contribute more? Because it seems
Yeah.
like there's expectations attached to
Yeah.
titles and accolades and achievements. So when you put pen to paper now, when you type this out now, it feels like there's something else attached to it, right? Do you
Yeah.
feel that pressure? Did you feel that pressure as you were writing this book?
I I didn't feel it when I was writing the book. I feel it more so now, in the climate that we're in. I think for me, this was actually the first book I wanted to write. But Be the Bridge needed to be written first to be the cornerstone of, the work that we do, the lifestyle that we lead. I wanted to explain. I felt like the word reconciliation was misunderstood and misused, and I wanted to, like, right, because we use it in our name as Be the Bridge, as a part of our tagline. I wanted to make sure that people understood what it entails. And I totally understand when some people say, hey, we can never have reconciliation if there's never been any conciliation. I
Right. Yep.
totally
Of
agree with that.
course.
I get it. I totally agree. And I agree with it. But for me, this is what God has planted in my heart and how He's equipped me to lead. And so I get it. And I'm really looking at not just what has happened in the world is, like, the last 500 years, here in the States. I'm thinking globally, and I'm also thinking in Acts. And so God has given us the ministry of
Mm.
reconciliation. So I'm not just looking at this present time and this present day, about the word reconciliation. I'm looking back and I'm looking forward. And so that's why I choose to use it.
That's so helpful. I think rooting the words that we use in more of a holistic,
Yeah.
historic perspective.
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever told you this or had the opportunity to, but
Hmm.
I gained an appreciation for your work when a couple of members of our church actually hosted a Be the Bridge group years ago.
Oh, okay.
And so they asked me to be a part of it. So I was actually
Uh,
walking through the curriculum with them,
uh-huh.
people from different churches. And I gained an appreciation for your work, especially as it relates to how great it is at creating conversations with people.
Yeah.
When you have a title like Brown Faces, White Spaces,
Uh-huh.
that's a conversation starter.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love
yeah,
that title. That's a
yeah,
conversation
yeah,
starter.
yeah.
When you think about this work now, and when you
Uh-huh.
think about how you framed it and how you framed this conversation,
Yeah.
you're seeing both sides in terms
Hmm.
of you are acknowledging the space, but
Hmm.
you are seeing and recognizing and valuing the face and the
Yeah.
faces.
Yeah.
What is it like now having this type of conversation? Because you're very direct in the book.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
talking about everything from property ownership to sports
Yeah.
to politics to healthcare.
Yeah.
You're being very direct in a way that
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have necessarily expected when I picked up the book.
Right. Right. It's very different from the first book. The first book prepares you. I think and I'm also writing for our community. So our community, the Be the Bridge community, has done the first book. They've done Be the Bridge groups, all of those things, academy, whatever. But this is delving into the things that we do in our trainings. This is how we conduct our trainings in our academy. And so this is really, looking at telling our story, our Brown story. This is telling my dad's story, my grandfather's story, my grandmother's story, your parents' story, because it is being denied right in our face while these people are still living and breathing. And so there's some um, I would say some anger, with I want to make sure
Yes.
that I'm capturing this. I'm not trying to convince people, like people who don't believe in systemic racism. That's on them. They can fall and bump their head on that all they want. I can't exhaust myself in that, because that is you're choosing to be willfully ignorant in a world where I'm sitting here right before you, and I'm the first one in my immediate family to be born with the full set of rights, because I was born in 1973. So this is my lived experience. My dad was born into a world where he could not go to the school that he wanted. My grandfather was born into a world when he finished fighting in the Korean War. They said Negroes this way and white people this way.
Yes.
My grandmother was born into a world that she didn't get the right to vote until she was in her 30s in North Carolina. So this is our lived experience. I'm not going to sit up here and argue about our humanity. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not having those conversations. That's exhausting. And that makes you tap out,
Come on. Come on.
So I'm starting with people who recognize the brokenness, who say, you know what, this isn't right. I don't know what to do. I want to learn more. And I want to be a part of the solution, but I don't know how. That's what these books are about. That's what Be the Bridge is about. Everybody else that you want to be convinced of something, that's not my fight. Maybe that's someone else's fight, but that's not what I've been called to do, because that is a heart condition. And I'm not in the business of really changing and transforming hearts. That is for the Lord to do. But I can give you some information that can grip your heart, that
Yes.
can really start that process if you're open. But that is the Lord's work to do. It's the Lord that convicts. And so that's this book is very different, because we have to be what you would say gracious truth tellers. So it starts with grace, because there's grace that I'm even doing this.
Come
There's
on.
grace, the fact that I'm
That's
telling
good.
our stories. There's grace that I am, as I'm writing, the amount of trauma that I had to even deal with in writing and researching this. What I had to put my mind and my body through, just in order to write. That's grace. So it's starting with grace. The fact that I would willfully say, yes, Lord, to that. And now, moving on to truth telling, like, because I love you, and because I want to see us whole and better. Like, just because I want to see my community flourishing doesn't mean that I want any other community not flourishing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I owe it to you as a listener, as a reader, as a follower, as a part of our community, to tell the truth. Because that is what sets us free. If we were
Yes.
teaching truth, like in Germany, from the time that a child is 5 years old, they learn the history. And as ugly as it is, as painful as it is, because some of their ancestors may have done some of the atrocities and been murdered, and been murdered, were the oppressors, in Germany. They have to learn that at the age of 5. Okay, when they enter into school, there's no such thing as homeschooling in Germany. you know and so in America, like, we don't have, like, because we don't teach the truth, and we change the narrative. We lie, period. We
Come
lie.
on. Talk about it. Talk about it.
We lie, and we know nothing healthy is built on lies. We know that scripturally. you know? And so even with that, because of that, that is why we are where we are today, is because we have not repented. And if anyone should know how to do this work, this work of restoration, the work of redemption, the work of repair, it's the body of Christ. I mean, it should be a part of our DNA of who we are. And so something's wrong, And so I have to point out what is wrong.
Yes.
That's a part of it. Like, we have to point out what is wrong and how do we reinform? How do we create better spiritual formation for followers of Christ? And so I think, I can't let Christians off the handle with it, off the handle with this, because we have a deeper responsibility. Because also, when we look at Canada, they've had some type of truth and reconciliation process. Australia, truth and reconciliation process. New Zealand, truth and reconciliation process. These are the ones that I know of, South Africa, truth and reconciliation
Absolutely.
process,
Yeah. Bishop Tutu. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
and I mean, but in America, who we say we are a Christian, like what the dude said. He said, I lead, like, I read the Bible and I follow the Bible. That you not actually you may be reading the Bible, but I don't think you're following the Bible. You know what I'm saying?
And
Like,
that's so this is what's so interesting about you saying this
yeah,
is you start the book talking about this framework
yeah,
of preparation, dedication, but then the third word
liberation,
is the one that got me. Because you talk about
liberation,
liberation. So
yeah,
you start the book by really giving a theological framework for how we
yes,
understand and think through liberation and
yes,
looking at the scripture again. Can you
yes,
talk about how important and essential it is for us as the church to reclaim?
yeah,
Because I think we're really dealing with, and you said it so brilliantly at the beginning, how a lot of this started with CRT and this
yeah,
concept of the church latching on to these words,
uh-huh,
not
yeah,
understanding them, not seeing
yeah,
their true root. You
yeah,
had a phenomenal podcast on Be the Bridge podcast, which I commend to everybody whenever you talk about CRT
oh
with
yeah,
Dr. Tisby and also Dr. Edmondson.
yes, I
And
sure did.
and it's a brilliant breakdown of what this actually is, what it
Right.
really is, what the root
Hmm.
really is, what the foundation really is. So talk about why it's important for us to cling to an idea and concept of liberation
Yeah.
as we do this work, but also as we disciple people, as we
Yeah.
train people,
Yeah.
as we lead people.
Yeah. I think because, there's so many words that we have to reclaim. This country uses the word liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have no problem with that. And but understanding, like, from Genesis to Revelation, it's about God liberating his people, you know? And
Yes.
that is something that we hold to. That is something we cling to. Liberation is of God. Jesus is in the liberation business. Jesus came to earth so that we could be liberated of our sins. So therefore, we can be reconciled back to God
Mm.
and in turn be reconciled one to another.
Yes. Yes.
It is that liberated power that fuels Christianity, that fuels the gospel message. I tell the story about, when we're talking about, I'm talking about Moses liberating the
Yes.
children of Israel out of bondage in Egypt, you know, where they had been forgotten of the good works that had happened, years before through Joseph. So it's really important for us to really reclaim that word and not allow people to indoctrinate us into this partisan politicized word of liberation. Like, liberation is wrong, but there's nothing new under the sun, because we're doing the same thing with woke. We've
Come on.
we're doing, it's the same thing, and so we have to like really tell the truth about it. We have to reclaim it because, because a lot of us, when we even talk of the word woke, like that is spiritual for us. That is
Yes.
scriptural,
Yes.
for us, telling us to arise and to remember the goodness of the Lord. But, I wanted to not shy away from the words. It's a reclaiming of the word. And even with some words I'm not married to, there's some words that, that I'm not going to put my banner in that word. It's not worth the fight, but liberation is worth the fight.
Yes. Yes.
It's worth the fight and understanding what the liberating power is and reminding people of that. And so I kind of start in the framework of the book is that, that the dedication, preparation, and liberation. And so I tell stories of liberation, and how people have been liberated from systems, either you're remaining in those systems or building new tables, or, and being empowered in other ways. And that too, whether you choose to stay or whether you choose to go, can be liberating.
Now, I love that.
Uh-huh.
When you think
Yeah.
about you talking about not
Uh-huh.
just education and which you have done such a great job of building Be the
Mm-hmm.
Bridge as a platform for education, for awareness,
Right.
for resource, for information. But then
Mm-hmm.
as we think about you transitioning to talk about everything from healthcare to property ownership to sports to
Yeah.
so for some people they say, oh well, you don't need to talk about that type of stuff. Just stick with the scriptural.
Yeah.
Stick
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
stick with this. Stick with talking about the history. Stick with talking about education. But then
Uh-huh.
as you expand out, you track this line throughout really all of society. Talk about the
Yeah.
decision to really dive into those categories and areas.
Yeah.
I have this funny conversation with people whenever if they ever ask me,
Uh-huh.
is everything about race? And I always have this funny reaction. I'm like, well, no, but
Uh-huh.
also yes. No, but yeah, actually, for sure. And because both is
Yeah.
the it's a reality, is pervasive, it is
Yeah.
systemic within
Yeah.
really everything we do. Talk about why you made that decision to dive into these
Yeah.
areas that some people like, don't talk about that.
Yeah. Because we live in a racialized society. Everything we do in this country from the time that we're born on our birth certificate, we include race. No other country does that. So everything is racialized. And that race, it means something here, you know? And so, we represent systems. Brown faces represent systems. So my goal in this book was to tell our story in all of the systems. And so I'm also looking in systems that I have experience with or that I know people in or to even drive the point to let everyone know that it is baked into the DNA of every system, whether it's education or entertainment. Because we are brown people in all of those systems. And really, when I was back in, I think it was 2020, when I tell the story about LeBron James, and you remember
Exactly.
when
Yeah.
he had spoken out, he was minding, first of all, minding his business on the interview, minding his own business on the interview, telling his story and his experience as a Black man, even a Black man with money, and how, yes, the money is great, but it still don't keep people from calling you the N word. It still doesn't, and he told the story about how his house was graffiti, all these different things. He's speaking from his experience and knowing that his identity is just not basketball. He's a brother, he's a father, he's a son, he's a husband. You know what I'm saying? Like he's a friend. There's more to him than basketball. And then a political, well, commentator, a news person basically was commenting about him saying, I don't want to hear anything from anyone that
Right.
speaks that makes,
Yeah. Shut up and dribble.
millions of dollars best. Exactly. And she said, and I named the chapter that.
Exactly.
And she said, shut up and dribble. that thing made me so mad when she said that, because it's just this silencing. Because when I see people, no matter what they're doing, I know that there are people behind what they're doing. There are also human beings. And so I also am a fan of LeBron. I love what he does, not just on the court, but also off the court.
Yeah,
I love
absolutely
his
tremendous.
schools,
Significant.
yes, like I love all of that. And so that just really had me ponder, because like activism and protest has always been a part of our DNA, especially in the sports arena, because you use that platform where people can connect with you as an athlete. Maybe they can also connect to you as an activist, and you can bring awareness to the issues that are facing your community. That's always been a
Yes.
part of our story as a community when you're talking about sports, entertainment, all of it. And he was using his platforms. There's so many people that are afraid to use their platform, or they assimilate so much because they love the accolades, like OJ. I'm not black, I'm OJ. And,
Right.
and so but there's so many people who have actually used their platform for good. And so I wanted to talk about the history in some of the sporting events that brings about that type of uh, protest, why he was protesting, and then also our the way we have in society have tried to silence, football players and
Yeah,
track stars,
absolutely.
all of it. It starts because it gets people attention, and because some people, their only proximity or their only knowledge of another person of color is going to be through sporting events, because they're not going to school, they're not working for, and they're not living with.
And I hope people hear this as well
Yeah.
and see this throughout the book, because it's so easy for us to get caught up in this idea of
Yeah.
racial
Uh-huh.
reconciliation, racial justice being for certain groups of people or certain
Yeah.
people to do, but to see the
Right.
ways in which it seeps throughout all of life
All of
and
life.
requires all of our participation
Yeah.
to
It was
protest and
intentional.
it was intentional.
It was intentional. Like, I
It
mean,
was
we
intentional.
have we had separate leagues. And I was sometimes I wish I could rewind time, and I'd be like, don't take that deal. They're gonna fire all your managers. Don't just go after the money, don't just go after the fame, but it's like it's seeped into everything. And unless you really have intentionality of unraveling from this, I was just telling someone before is that we have a record of, we love to say, create a new policy. So we create a new policy and say, okay, we can't do that anymore. We can't discriminate anymore. We have the Fair Housing Act. We have the Voting Rights Act, which was gutted. Like that, we have these. So a lot of these acts are temporary. Brown people, let's remember that a lot of these acts can be reversed because they're acts.
Isn't it interesting? I just saw recently at a college, I cannot
Yeah.
remember the name, but they had removed Confederate generals' names from the bit, and then they put them
In
back,
Virginia. In Virginia, yeah,
and they
yeah.
put them
They put
back.
them back.
So even a
Yeah,
even a
they put
even
them
a
back.
progression that we make, it's repealed, it's
Yes.
reversed.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Wow.
And think about what I hope. First of all, I hope I hope he gets voted out. But I'm just saying, like,
Mm,
that is a slap in the face.
exactly.
And all we're doing is hardening our heart. Like you're saying, I'm justified at uplifting someone that hated half of our population. I'm justified in that. And not only that, we're going to memorialize their hate.
Yes. It's the
And we're going to put it in your
memorialization. It's the
neighborhoods, on your
memorializing.
schools,
Yes.
and name your streets and your neighborhoods after it. I mean, how depraved is that? I mean, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, look, it's so funny. People could believe in depravity, but they don't believe in systemic racism. I'm like,
Come on. You know it.
please,
You
come
know
on,
it.
and so it's just one of those things where I want to make sure in this book it says confronting systemic racism to bring about healing and restoration. So we're putting it out there. We're telling the truth. I'm talking about different systems. And I like to, when I write, I like to tell a personal story because people connect with
Always.
story.
Yes.
They
Yes.
connect with story. And I just don't want, I'm not a historian, so I don't want to just talk about a lot of history, but I want to reference and contextualize history, give you some historical accounts because you have to know how we got here. You have to know the why. And
Yes.
then intertwine that. Now, what does the Bible say? You know, what does
Yes.
the Bible say? And it's not just, okay, here's this, this, and this, but kind of weaving it within a story. But then also, I am very optimistic by nature. Like outside of Be the Bridge, if you meet Latasha Morrison, before Be the Bridge, after Be the Bridge, okay? I'm not doing this forever. It's going to be Latasha Morrison. She's a leader. You know, God is using her as a change agent, and she's a bridge builder. I've been a bridge
Yes.
builder.
Yes.
That DNA has been in me since I was a child. My family can tell you that. Like, my great aunt will tell you, like, so it's a part of who I am. So I'm not having to be something that I'm not. So whether I am in corporate America, which I did that 10 years before going into ministry, whether I'm in corporate America, whatever assignment the Lord has me on next, I'm here until God says otherwise. But like I said, I hold this stuff with open hands,
And
and
I do
yeah,
want to say, like, for
yeah,
people, you don't even know this, but there are a few situations behind the scenes that um people have mentioned your name in. And when I
yeah,
say you live this thing, you
yeah,
live this thing. Like,
yeah.
I
I
mean,
I
you
tried to, I
really,
tried to,
like, and
yeah,
the same statement was made in both cases. They said Latasha is a real one. They said
yeah,
she literally walks what she talks.
yeah. Well,
Um,
that means a lot to
and so
me. Like,
I do want to say that because I've never had the opportunity to tell you that, but like
yeah,
hearing how people refer to you, it just shows how much respect that you carry
yeah,
and how consistent your life is. There is one thing I did want to ask you. I say this as someone who doesn't just host a podcast and lead this organization, but also who's a
mhm,
pastor of a church.
yeah,
And you've worked with so many pastors. We talk about what it
yeah,
means for the church to be complicit. We
mm,
talk about what it means for the church to compromise, what it means for the church to really be the birthplace, the womb for so many of
yeah,
these prejudice movements. And yes, we acknowledge all that the church does for good, and but
mhm,
sometimes we don't really reckon with this concept and this idea that
mm,
racial injustice is given language and theology and shape
mhm,
often in our church spaces because it's
yeah,
not confronted. What do you feel is essential right now for pastors, ministry leaders? And really, I do want to zoom out and expand that maybe a little bit more to
yeah,
Christian influencers, because
yeah,
now there are so many people who have platforms, and we're
mhm,
entering into this moment, and we are in this moment of great
yeah,
protest and collaboration and organization. What is incumbent upon pastors and ministry leaders to do to equip themselves in this conversation and equip themselves for action as well?
right. Um, I really want pastors to see this as a discipleship issue. So therefore, just like you would disciple your church into anything else, like this is a sin issue. At the bottom line, like racism, white supremacy is a sin issue. And how you handle sin, you don't just erase it or try to water it down. We talk about it. And so where you lack understanding, you have to seek understanding, And so we have to lean into this conversation. We always talk about, listening to voices that are not like your own, following people that are not like yours, educating yourself. So learning, become a learner of the word. Don't expect anyone to teach you, but, there's so many organizations out there. Be the Bridge is not the only organization, but there's so many organizations that are doing equipping. Listen to their podcasts, take their courses, really see this as important and what the world is trying to tell people that it doesn't matter. that it doesn't matter. And, we're just, keep crying victims, and so really, but when you educate yourself, you'll see that, wow, these are amazing people who are resilient and who have survived. If we think about any other groups, especially the indigenous story and the African American story, any other group where those things have been done to, I mean, a completely stripping of identity and language. You know,
Yes.
that's like that. The just the magnitude of that. It's important for pastors to preach truth, and a part of preaching truth is to talk about the Imago Dei in everyone. I mean, even starting with um, Genesis and seeing God's redemption plan for all his people, seeing the diversity in Genesis, like Abraham had to leave his home and his people and go someplace else. Listen right there, like cross cultural, cross ethnic. He had to cross those lines, when we start even thinking about just even as it relates to refugees, like, so many people in the Bible have been refugees, because of, politics. They had to flee into Egypt, to save his life, so from political persecution, and so, I mean, so just all of this story, the Bible weaves this beautiful tapestry of God's redemptive plan from Genesis to Revelation. And, when I look at the story of Jonah, when I look at all these stories, I can see God's justice and righteousness throughout the story. Right now, I'm in seminary, so like we've been in the book of Acts. So like, and it's just amazing. Like, we first of all, starting in Acts 1, and 2, you see this nations and tribes gathered together because now
Yes.
the Holy Spirit is going to come, and it's going to, like, the outpouring is going to happen, not just for the Jew, but also for the Gentile,
Yes.
and we see this, and we are here today because of that. It started with 12, and we are here today because of that. So you see that. You see Peter's transformation. There's a reason why that story was documented in the Bible and canonized. Like, there's a reason why Peter's story is there. There's a reason why Paul's story there. There's a reason why this is, short verse. You see Stephen, you see where power was taken from the majority and given to the minority group, where they placed the 7 leaders, and by their names, we know that they were Greek. And Stephen was one of them.
Yes.
And Stephen was stoned, because this is the thing. The other people were allowed to flee that were teaching. They didn't stone them, but they stoned this Gentile. They stoned this Greek speaking Stephen. And so here you are. But when you're able to see that, God is able to convict, and you're able to look inward and outward in the world that we're living in and make the connection. And that's what a pastor's role is to do, is to help people contextualize and make the connection, to make sure that we're just not reading the word, but we're allowing the word to read us, that we're giving the background context of what is happening, what is the culture and what they're living in. That helps us understand. And, we can go on, but a part, in Revelation 7 and 9, we see that our ethnic identity,
Yes. Will be retained in eternity.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And so there, that lets you know that it's important to God. Like, God is not just some boring God. I mean, just think about when we think about humanity and how we look and the different colors and just all the variations. And then look at the sky. Look at the ocean. I tell people, like, God is amazing. Like look at the beluga whale, a peacock, and he called it good.
Yes.
So
Yes.
if we can appreciate nature and we can appreciate the birds in the air, the mammals and fish in the water, and we can look at the beautiful flowers and say, God did that. We should be able to look at humanity and say, God did
Yes.
that, and not feel
Yes.
some type of resentment because someone looks different than you. That's absurd.
I love that you're issuing this challenge
Yeah.
to us as pastors to preach the Bible in its context, to
Yes.
teach the
Yes.
Bible with its fullness, but also with the lens of
Yes.
liberation as well.
Yes. That's the lens.
To see the places
Yes.
where God is drawing his people together. And for those people, I want to close with this.
Hmm.
Thank you so much for your time. This has been
Yeah, no
amazing.
problem.
As as people are listening to this, they're overwhelmed, they're overcome because
Yeah.
this is an exhausting conversation. I sense
Yeah.
the fatigue
Yes,
and
I
the
do too.
exhaustion for so many of us as we get ready to enter into 2024. It feels like 2020 was really yesterday. It feels like
Yeah.
it's been the longest 4 years, but also the shortest 4 years in many ways. And I think we're all taking this collective deep breath, this deep sigh. And for our Black audience that is listening and that is feeling discouraged, frustrated, in anguish, um, really petrified about what is to come around the corner,
Yeah.
what would you say to those who are listening who feel in this moment like there isn't any hope? You, as an
Yeah.
optimistic, hope filled person, drenched in the scripture, the presence of God, the power of God,
Yeah.
but also education as well. What would you say that would encourage someone who is watching or listening to this?
Yeah. It's okay to feel afraid, you know? It's okay to feel fearful. Sometimes, like God also created emotions, and I do believe that sometimes we like to downplay and like we're not able to feel, but that's real. And I think I have to remind myself of God's word. So I would say for people who are listening that if you're frustrated, lean into God's word, lean into prayer, and take deep breaths, you know. Um, Also fill your life with things that bring you joy. Love on your family. Sometimes you got to turn, it's not that you're ignoring, but sometimes you have to take breaks from the world as far as the news. You have to take care of yourself,
Yes, yes.
I walk every day, I'm walking every day. I have a dog. I don't have any kids, but I got a dog. And he's a lot, and but those are some things that help me endure. Don't take myself so seriously. My family is gonna keep me humble, so they don't care nothing about the New York Times. They don't care. My mama like, when you coming over here?
Exactly. I
you know
love
you
Black
know
families. They don't
yeah,
care nothing
yes,
about
they
that. You
don't
got that
they
little
don't care.
award.
They
That's
don't
good,
care.
baby.
They
But
don't care. Because honestly, even speaking of that, because you asked me how I felt with that, what you said about me, as far as when people they say she's the real deal, like that means more to me than New York Times bestseller. You know, like that stuff gonna burn. Like that don't mean nothing. You know.
wow.
Now I kind of laugh about it, because it happened 6 months after my book came out. It was in the middle of 2020. So
Right.
although we've tried to do the reverse on so many things, you can't take it away. So,
So
so
true.
I so I look at it. We can reverse and do all these other
Can't
things.
take that
Like
away
you
from you.
ain't gonna reverse that. And so, but what means more than anything when people come up to me and say, you know, this has changed my life. Like I'm doing this now because of this, or I met this person because of this. Like that means more to me than any other thing. And I want to read this something I wrote earlier this year
Hmm.
about hope. And I just want to read a little bit
Yes,
of it
yes.
for your community. And hope means that we're looking to the future and we're waiting in anticipation for God to move. So hope is about anticipation. Um, it conveys, and even in the Greek, the word hope, quava, carries the meaning of to wait or to hope. So to wait and to hope are actually the same thing. So hope is waiting. You know, waiting is also hope. So we're waiting with hope. It conveys the idea of looking forward with eager expectation and anticipation. So hope also looks at the past. It remembers what God says, what God did, and what God is doing, and what God will do. Biblical hope is confident in expectation and trust in God's promises and faithfulness. It goes beyond mere optimism and wishful thinking. It is grounded in the character of God. And it is the certainty that we need, and that we know that God will fulfill his promises. So for me, I am holding on to what God did, what God is doing, and what God will do. And that is what my hope is in. My hope cannot be in politics, and partisanship. Like that is a part of the process. And I'm going to do my part as a citizen, as an ambassador of Christ in this world, in this, how some people say, in this empire that I'm in,
Yes.
for this short season. I'm going to do my part. I'm going to show up. But I know at the end of the day, my hope is in God. And I also think back to our great great grandparents who were hoping for a time that like we're in now, who didn't have some of the luxuries that we have now. So I'm remembering what God did. So I'm not going to forget, how far he's brought us. And God is at work now. God is moving and we may not feel it. It may feel like things are falling apart. It may feel like, that things are reversing, but God is at work, in the hearts of his people, and it may not be the majority, but it's always a remnant.
Yes.
It's always a remnant. It's always a few. And God's word never, listen, and sometimes we need this to really connect back to our source, because we start feeling ourselves and thinking we done made it, we
Come
done
on.
did it, you know? And so maybe this is an opportunity to connect and to seek the face of God. And I don't know what the future holds, and how the old folks say, but I know who
I know
holds the
who holds
future
it. Yes, yes. Come
you
on.
know? And so it's just like getting back to some of the basics and just really understanding who God is. And even regardless of who the president is or anyone, it matters. It does matter. And I'm not leaving that up to happenstance.
Right.
But just understanding that regardless that God is in control,
Yes. Yes.
of it all. And whether people have to help be accountable on this side or the other side, you're gonna be held accountable, on this side
Yes.
or the other side. And so I invite people into a collective repentance, to not give up and to pray for, not just for this country, because I think that is just praying for America to me is Christianity is global, you know?
Come on.
So
That's
we
the
need to
truth.
be praying for people everywhere, not get so caught up in just what's happening
Yes.
here in America, but what's happening,
Yes.
um, across those waters, what's
Yes.
happening, you know, in Congo, in Haiti,
Yes.
you know, what's what
Yes.
we know what's happening in Palestine,
Yes.
but we're not really talking about Haiti, and I was just even praying for that country, the other day, like it's forgotten. And if you know the history of Haiti, if you know a little bit of the history of Haiti and why Haiti is in the state that it's in, and the
Yes.
debt that Haiti
Exactly.
had to pay, a debt to the French for its freedom. How backwards is that? And so anyway, but I'm just saying, like, in this moment in time, there's a call. Prayer is powerful. And and I think it's a time to really garner our people in prayer, and looking at what has happened in your church. Like only God could do
Yes.
something like that,
Only
you
God,
know?
my goodness, because it
Oh,
wasn't my idea. Only God.
only God
Only
could
the
do
Lord.
something like that. And listen, we think we think this is what, and I also believe this, that we're not just dealing with a I don't believe we're dealing with the thought process of majority of people. I think we are dealing with the thought process of a powerful minority
Yes. Yes.
group. It's a powerful minority group, but also remembering that it was a powerful minority group that convinced the church
Yes.
that executing Jewish people was okay.
Yes. Yes.
And so I'm
It's that
not
powerful
missed on that.
minority.
Yeah, it's
And
and
the powerful
and
minority can change it too. It's just the
exactly,
power.
exactly, exactly. So I'm holding on to hope, and I'm gonna remember what God did, what God is doing, and what God will do, and like God's gonna move, like God's gonna move.
Latasha Morrison, thank you so much for your time. This has been outstanding and encouraging conversation. The book is
Yeah.
Brown Faces, White Spaces. It's right over her shoulder. You can see it over there. If you're watching this
Yeah.
on the YouTube, it's right over her shoulder
Yeah.
and in her hands.
Yeah. This is the pre-reader's
Latasha,
copy.
I'm gonna tell everybody, go get the book, go
Yes.
use it in your materials, put it in your church
Yeah.
library. It's gonna be up here soon, so people
Yeah.
can take it in the church library and rent it out. But
Yeah.
thank
So
you so much
good.
for what you do. Thank you for being the real deal on and off mic, on and off stage. We'll
Yeah.
continue to support you and continue to support the incredible work that you and Be the Bridge are doing.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And keep shepherding God's people.
I will. I
That's important
promise. With
work.
your help, with your
Yeah.
help, with your
Yeah.
resources.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.